what they make, and what they do. Recall that milieus are coded blocks of space-time, and that every milieu is in contact with another milieu. So we have an external milieu, or Jessie's material surroundings, such as the parking lot, her car, the gymnasium, all of those things that are there in her external environment. There are more, but those are examples for now. We can consider Jessie's internal milieu, the workings of her body, her nervous system, her digestive system, her respiratory system, and how her internal milieu interacts with her external milieu. So for example, and this is not really the refrain, but it's the beginnings of how we can think about that. Is she calm amongst her friends in the parking lot, yet experiences tension and nervousness and an increase in heart rate and sweating as she enters the gym? Or is the relation between the two milieus the opposite? Is she nervous in the parking lot and therefore detaches and breathes, using the internal milieu of her respiratory system to calm herself before entering the gymnasium? Does she speed up her walk? Does she slow down? The point here is to consider the relationship and the rhythm between those two milieus, the external and the internal, the differences between them, the rhythms, and how the rhythms are beginning to form a different milieu from that chaos. Does her walk, her breath, her body mark differences and intervals between the space of the parking lot with her friends and the space of the gym with other girls who dislike her, some of whom hate her? Perhaps the refrain begins to form here in her body, but let's keep going. We can also consider Jessie's intermediary milieu, which is the basic stuff of subjectivity. White girl from a working class family who lives, quote, 1 block from Cracktown, as well as her annex milieu, her clothes, her sweatpants rather than the cheerleading skirt. No ponytail, secured tightly with a ribbon. She drives a badged up car that is more characteristic of working class students in the town than the middle class girls who are the other cheerleaders, and so on. So how is the refrain forming here in all its fragility? If milieus are the material substance of territorial assemblages, we can look to the relation of Jessie's submilieus to mark those rhythms. Ron Bogue explains that, quote, periodic repetition encodes a milieu, so we must distinguish the meter, or how things are coded, of the repetition from the rhythm that occurs between two or more milieus. So remember that meter implies repetition of the same. It's a self-identical pattern that is reproduced over and over again. So a metronome, you can set it, and it just tick-tock like that, and it's just this rhythmic thing that doesn't change. The steady ticking of a clock. I wrote down an annoying tapping of a pen on a desk. Those kinds of things. Those are meters. There is some repetition, or meters, in Jessie's milieu. We've got coded bodies in uniform, coded voices in synchronous unison, coded dance moves that secure identities. Many of these are metered repetitions, not territorial refrains formed from rhythms and milieus. So there's a difference. So there's some repetition here, but it's not that rhythmic becoming that Deleuze is talking about in terms of how the refrain is made. Where am I? Oh, that is, as Deleuze and Guattari wrote, rhythm is the unequal or incommensurable, always in a process of transcoding, operating with heterogeneous blocks. Rhythm, as Ron Bogue wrote, is difference or relation, the in-between, whereby milieus communicate with each other, within themselves, and as chaos. Rhythm is primary in the constitution, to the constitution of a milieu, not a byproduct. What's most interesting here is that regular meter is inseparable from the inter-milieu rhythms of difference. As Deleuze and Guattari assert, a milieu does exist by virtue of periodic repetition, but such repetition only has the effect of producing a difference through which the milieu passes into another milieu. It is the difference that is rhythmic. Jessie standing in the middle of a group dance move is rhythmic. It produces difference. It exhibits relations among her submilieus as well as the milieus of other organisms in the space. The other girls, the gym, the cheerleading skirt that's lifted, the bodies that are moving seductively, and so on. There is more rhythm to come for the refrain to be fully expressed into state territory. So I go back to the article. In the locker room, you change into your uniform, a muscled, differentiated body invading a short skirt and halter top, blowing apart masculinity and femininity. You apply a little bit of mascara, just a touch of lipstick, but you're unable to attach that hair bow to your Posh Spice style inverted bob. The pep rally begins with you and the other girls in the common space of the staggered lineup. The social field is alive with energy, expectation, seeking sameness, recognizability, and equilibrium. Or exhibition, scantily clad bodies, and flirtatious gestures. The cheer starts up. The audience of mostly teens with their molar gaze anticipates fulfillment. They know what to expect. Sexual enticement, seeing sex, imagining sex, yelling for sex. The final move arrives. The abyss opens wide, ready to enfold potentiality. The girls who frame you spin around in their places, lift up the back of their skirts, and expose the mascot paws emblazoned there. 3 girls in the back row rotate their hips, gyrating. A few other girls just shake their hips a little instead. You perform a standing backflip. The molar gaze goes off in multiple directions, not knowing where to look or how to synthesize the irresolvable contradiction. Your becoming is a visible incoherence, an undoing, a fracture. You transform, the cheer transforms, the gaze transforms. For a moment, everyone and everything becomes something else. There's fleeting success. It will not be the last time. You will do it again, again, and again. You will backflip every time. To achieve the goal that has no end means ceasing to be what you are in order to become what you cannot be, which is supramolecular forever. The goal is a limit approach never reached. What is important is this process. So 3 things happen when a refrain is made. These 3 things are not evolutionary, but are 3 aspects of a single and same thing. They are differentiated from one another, but not successive. Deleuze and Guattari describe these 3 aspects as forces of chaos, terrestrial forces, and cosmic forces. Let's take each of these up to understand the process of Jessie's refrain or her backflip. Forces of chaos occur on the threshold of a territory, a force of orientation and direction. Milieus and rhythms are formed out of chaos. The direction is the force toward a point of stability. Rongbog offers this interpretation from Deleuze and Guattari. A child afraid in the dark sings a song to reassure herself, and in doing so establishes a stable point in the midst of chaos, a locus of order in a non-dimensional space. Rhythms draw milieus from chaos, but the resolution of chaos isn't moving toward a predicted or predetermined order. Deleuzian chaos is more like a feeling of dislocation, disorientation, not at home. The rhythm of the tune is drawn from a chaos that exists in the middle of things, in the middle of relations and exchanges. And the rhythm is directional at this point rather than dimensional. The direction of rhythm is toward creation, toward creating spontaneous, not predictable order. Forces of chaos are directional, yet fluctuating and provisional. Jessie's backflip is a refrain that is a force of chaos. It is a point of stability, a thread of a tune. Deleuze and Guattari wrote, how very important it is when chaos threatens to draw an inflatable, portable territory. If need be, I'll put my territory on my own body. I'll territorialize my body, the house of the tortoise, the hermitage of a crab, but also the tattoos that make my body a territory. A refrain then makes us feel secure. It constructs a territory and is thus expressive. As Ian Buchanan explained, territories of refrains work against the anxieties, pressures, and fears that we feel. It doesn't do away with them, but it gives them a different form. Jessie, seeking comfort in chaos, does not conform to the dance. Her refrain, her point of comfort, her direction toward home is her backflip. The second aspect of the refrain is a territorial force of making an assemblage, a force of dimension. So we've gone from a point of direction to a point of dimension and spreading out. A directional milieu becomes a dimensional territory when the acts of a rhythm become expressive. When rhythms become expressive, that's when they perform or form territories. Deleuze and Guattari wrote that, quote, the refrain is rhythm and melody that have become territorialized because they have become expressive. And they have become expressive because they are territorializing. See, they're not going in circles, are they? These expressions are not emotions, but content put to work. Expressions do something. They result in new affects and potentiality and potentially new capacities to form further territories and assemblages. Jessie's backflip, or her refrain, was not simply a function of the milieu. It expressed difference. Her refrain, her backflip, is a territorializing, expressive act that changes the dimensionality of a space, not the other way around, in which the space determines the function or the expression. Territorial forces of the refrain are signatures. They connect the domain to the owner it created. That is, Jessie's backflip created her and the territory at the same time. That is what refrains do. They mark territories. Jessie's backflip marked her territory, not unlike a cat who goes about spraying in corners of a house or trees in the yard is claiming a possession. Jessie's backflip as refrain is an artistic signature, one that makes a circle around a point of stability. It was differentiated from the other milieus and established as a territory. While other girls were chanting and dancing, while the crowd anticipated a flirtatious show of their bloomers, Jessie's refrain divested her of any fixed connection to what cheerleaders in her particular milieu are supposed to do. Not who they are, but what they're supposed to do. These are autonomous yet dimensional qualities that Ron Bogue describes as, quote, expressing the relation of the territory to the internal milieu of impulses and the external milieu of circumstances. In other words, the territorial motif or impulse was the wearing of the uniform, standing in formation, participation in a group, just these basic rituals of cheerleading. Those are those internal impulses of a territory. Jessie's territorial counterpoints were the external circumstances, having an audience, performing rather than just standing there in practice like she had been doing, actually wearing the skirt instead of her sweatpants, having an athletic body that gave her gravitational lift, the workings of her body's internal system to create the conditions for backflipping. All these counterpoints work to decode, even temporarily, the compulsion, function, activity of a cheerleading girl who lifts her skirt as a coded, fixed, metered repetition. Her backflip is a refrain, a, quote, configuration of elements that have been decoded from their milieu functions and recoded with new territorial functions. And that's Ron Bogue again. It is a question no longer of signatures but a style, Deleuze and Guattari explain. When a signature becomes a style, a third force is at play, a force of passage, a cosmic force. Cosmic forces are those that move from intensive to virtual, when a threshold is exceeded and change is triggered. Cosmic forces are lines of escape, flights of passage, regrouping of forces to take to another assemblage. A cosmic force takes what has been modified and specialized into new territories. Ron Bogue explained, every territory has a center of intensity where its forces come together, a center that is at once within the territory and outside it. The point here is that Jessie's backflipping, her refrain, did not originate in a cheerleading routine on that particular day on that specific gym floor. The backflip was something she learned to do in another milieu with a different function. As a white working class girl in a small rural town with no gymnastics center, and all that's her milieu, Jessie first learned to backflip on a neighbor's trampoline, then on grass in her front yard, then with spotters on mats in the high school the high school's weight room. Backflipping for Jessie had a variety of functions and expressions in bits and pieces of numerous milieus. Its import to the territory of cheerleading emerged as a refrain that allowed passage among different territories, made up of fragments of milieus. At the very least, Jessie's backflip as a refrain is portable. It brings comfort. It is a marker of a re-territory, and as a line of flight temporarily recoded the work of a cheerleader, the function of a skirt, the expression of a body. Okay, so I'm done with that. So I don't really have a conclusion. I've been trying to think about, and I need to keep thinking about, well, how do I connect rise of vocality and the refrain? And so I'm going to show something that may do that, and it may not, but that's something that I'll explain in a moment. So rather than make some neat and tidy summative remarks in conclusion, I want to leave you with a non-conclusion, a provocation instead. I've spent some time, a lot of time, talking about the refrain's features and its process of forming territories from bits and pieces of other milieus. The refrain is rhythmical in that it assembles and heightens difference, and it can be carried from territory to create new conditions for living. Refrains draw us in. They are compelling in their expression. So when you go into your groups today, I'd like to offer something for you to talk about. Since I've been working on this paper, I see refrains everywhere. They're everywhere, and I just can't, I'm obsessed with them, and I just can't stop thinking about it. So I found something online that I'm going to show you, and it might provoke your conversations about refrains. Something that I've done here in this paper is I've stopped about 3/4 of the way into Plateau 11. The last part of Plateau 11, Deleuze starts talking about music. And he says that music is the deterritorialization of the refrain. So he says when we start to make music, we deterritorialize those refrains. And he think about Jimi Hendrix playing the Star Spangled Banner. I mean, that's a song that is iconic in American culture. And then Jimi Hendrix did the thing. I guess I could have shown that, but I just thought of it. So anyway, okay. So y'all can look. If you've got some smart devices, you can look at that in your groups. But I want to show you a clip to provoke your conversations about refrains and think about how music deterritorializes refrains. So what I'm going to show you is that many of you who are okay. Let me just keep reading because now I'm getting off on something else. Okay. So here's a little description. Those of us who frequently use social media or the internet for news most likely knows what it means to auto-tune something. And it's so interesting that in the refrain, Deleuze writes about the synthesizer and the function of the synthesizer and how it perfects sound. It perfects the imperfections in singing, and it scrapes off pieces that we don't want heard. It compresses things and all that. Is that right, Jeff? Would you say that's what a synthesizer is? So auto-tuning does something rather similar with that. And so, all right, so auto-tuning. And so those of us who live in the U.S. may remember a news story from last spring about Charles Ramsey, who is an African-American man living in Cleveland who rescued 3 white women who had been kidnapped and held hostage for almost 10 years. They were boarded up in a house in his neighborhood. So I want to show you the interview and then the auto-tune, and perhaps you can think about the refrain in the way that I've talked about it, and pay attention to some of the milieus that you might see and the bits and pieces of the milieus that get picked up and used in the auto-tuning. And the auto-tuning is actually the deterritorialization of the refrain in some ways. So that might be something to play with in your groups when you go, or you can talk about something else. But I thought it would be a really interesting way to end. And it's not very long, so I think it'll be, are we okay for me to play this? I've got to find the interview first, which is down here. Okay, so here's Charles Ramsey.
Here, I'm talking with Charles Ramsey. He's a neighbor. Walk me through again what happened this afternoon. You heard screaming.
I heard screaming. I'm eating my McDonald's. I come outside. I see this girl going nuts trying to get out of the house. So I go on the porch. I go on the porch, and she says, "Help me get out. I've been in here a long time." So, I figured it's a domestic violence dispute. So I open the door. We can't get in that way because how the door is, it's so much that a body can't fit through, only your hand. So we kick the bottom. And she comes out with a little girl, and she says, "Call 911. My name was Amanda Beard."
Did you know who that was when she said that?
When she told me, it didn't register until I got to call the 911. And now I'm like, I'm calling the 911 for Amanda Beard. I thought this girl was dead. You know what I mean? And she got on the phone, and she said, "Yeah, this is me." And the detective, Cook, right here, Detective Gregory Cook said, "Charles, do you know who you rescued?" I said,
When did you see Gina?
About 5.
So
About 5 minutes after the police got here, see, the girl Amanda told the police, I ain't just the only one. It's some more girls up in that house. So they went up there, 30, 40 deep, and when they came out, it was just astonishing, because I thought they would come up with nothing. I figured, whoever she was, and like I say, my neighbor, you got some big testicles to pull this off, bro. You see this every day. I mean, every day.
How long have you lived here?
I've been here a year.
Okay.
You should come around. I barbecue with this dude. We eat ribs and whatnot. And listen to salsa music. You should come around.
You had no indication that there was any.
Hey, bro, not a clue that girl was in that house. Or anybody else was in there against their will. Because how he is he just comes up to his backyard, plays with the dogs, tinkers with his cars and motorcycles, goes back in the house. So he's somebody that you look away because he's not doing nothing but the average stuff. You see what I'm saying? There's nothing exciting about him. Well, until today.
Shit on the girls' faces. I can't imagine. You see the sunlight. You feel
Bro, I knew something was wrong when a little pretty white girl ran into a black man's arms. Yeah, give it away. Give it away.
Thank you very much for your time.
Either she homeless or she got problems.
Thank you for being there, man. Charles Ramsey, his neighbor, heard the screaming, took action, went and did what he needed to do. The rest is unfolding before us
So,
here
yeah,
on
let's do
SIQR.
this.
I'm going to send it back to you.
So we get a real glimpse into Charles Ramsey's milieu here, and so now I want to show you the refrain, and you could also talk about how this refrain is working, how the process is formed in your groups if you want, and also how it's deterritorialized, how the refrain is deterritorialized. So this is shorter. I hope there's no commercial.
I knew something was wrong when a little pretty white girl ran into a black man's arms. I knew something was wrong when a little pretty white girl ran into a black man's arms. Something's wrong here. That's the only reason why she ran to a black man. Either she homeless or she got problems. And she leave my McDonald's. I come outside. I see this girl going nuts. I see this girl going nuts. Trying to get in her house. So I go on the porch. And she said, help me get out. I said, I've been here a long time. So, I figured it's a family violence dispute. So I opened the door. We can't get it that way, but how the door is so much that a body can't fit through, only your hand. So we pick up the bottom. And she comes out with a little girl. And she says, we eat ribs and whatnot. Listen to salsa music. We eat ribs and whatnot. Plays with the dog. We eat ribs and whatnot. Listen to salsa music. We eat ribs and whatnot. I knew something was wrong when a little pretty white girl ran into a black man's arms. I knew something was wrong when a little pretty white girl ran into a black man's arms. Something is wrong here. Yeah, give it away. Give it away.
Charles, thank you very much.
Yeah, give it away.
Thank you very much for your Charles, thank you for being there, man. Charles Ramsey, neighbor, heard the screaming.
All right, that's it. Thank you. That's it. And if you wanted to pull that up in your groups, just go to Mashable.com and type in Charles Ramsey. If you've got your smart devices and you want to look at it again and play with it. Oh, I need to stay here, don't I?
For a couple of minutes,
Okay.
yeah. Thank you for that, Alecia. That was fabulous and hilarious and disturbing in equal measure, actually. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Yes, Jeff is so keen to get in. He had his hand up before I'd stop. Go for it, Jeff.
You were trying to, well, we didn't find conclusion. Can I invite people to be around the individual machine performance at 5 o'clock tomorrow with this superb presentation in the head and in the ears, and invite you to respond to that performance as a continuation of this entanglement.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think it's a very logical, well, the process would be complete because I don't deal with that musicality. I mean, I could, but so I went to get Charles Ramsey to
what
sort of
we're
do that. But
attempting to do tomorrow is to manifest Rise of Vocality.
Mhm.
It's as simple as that.
Well, there you go.
Praise Buddha. I know. Because yeah, that would be great.
One more, and then we'll obviously have to break up and talk about this. Yeah.
Maybe this is getting into our group time, but when I remember when this was created, and it was went around my Facebook page, and there was a big debate about whether, this sort of, for lack of a better word, sort of de-heroized human beings look like fools, and was there, all kinds of racist undertones, and so I'm thinking, they created a new milieu. I don't know. I'm not
Territory.
Territory.
Yeah.
And
And I think that's what I would love for y'all to talk about in your groups, and I want to float around and hear how you think about the milieux that are there and picked up and used in auto-tuning, because you can see them. You have visual. Those of you who are in the States can provide the context for the international people in terms of the race and class. And I have to say, Stephanie Daza posted some article that was great, and maybe you can find it for your group. And we talked about a little bit on Facebook about this, yeah, refrains do pretty incredible things, and this is an example of what they can do.
articulate. And they
Right.
cut out the part where he was articulate.
I know.
Talked about McDonald's, talked about, the...
So what is going on with that? What is going on with that is important. Yeah. So.
That's like not, it's not the same anymore.
Right.
Because now it's different. Now there's so many other things have happened. So it's totally it's a completely different.
It's continued to be deterritorialized.
Yeah.
I mean, even now, months later. So it's interesting to watch the process of the refrain work its way through popular culture, media, politics, all of that. Mission accomplished behind George Bush. I mean, we could, do that analysis. It's got so much potential for. I'm just really crazy about it right now. So.
Okay, well, thank you. And can I just once again thank Alecia? Okay, well, what's going to happen now is as